I'd like to introduce firstly Attain before I move over to introducing Shikha, who's very graciously accepted to be today's expert. Attain is a small community of experts from different domains and backgrounds who's come together to try and improve the academic quotient of students all across the country. You must have all noticed in your own different ways that academia and industry are tending to move further away than ever before. Technology change, the COVID impact, a lot of reasons, but we are hoping that as a community, we are able to bridge some of that gap and help the young minds scale up faster than they normally would. So that's really a little bit about Attain, and I'm really grateful also to Shikha, who's come on board as an expert, and she's taking this session today on demystifying organizational development. Now, personally, I know for a fact, having been an HR practitioner, that is possibly the least understood of all the HR disciplines. People understand recruitment, some even understand compensation and benefits that many people run away from. But OT is a different ballgame, and it really requires, and I would say, a high intellect and passion to kind of charter in that direction. So I'm glad that Shikha volunteered to take this session. Thank you so much, Shikha, for that.
My pleasure.
And Shikha is a dynamic and vibrant personality who I'm sure many of you, if you follow her on LinkedIn, know that she carries this tag passionpreneur after her name. And that's evident really because her first post is possibly out somewhere around 6:30, 7 in the morning, and the last somewhere around 8:30, 9 in the evening. And throughout the day, she's really trying to motivate, charge, and excite the entire community. And really great job that you're doing there, Shikha.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Means a lot.
Of course, and I think you've also spent over 18 years in the HR fraternity, in the L&D space, and covered both the IT as well as the manufacturing sectors. Uh, she's also done a lot of OD work in and transformed not only individuals but also entire organizations. And she's worked with some of the best names that you can possibly be aware of. You know, companies like Wipro, like Yamaha, Panasonic, and Honda. So in her new avatar, she's a mentor, she's an author, she's a motivational speaker on one hand, and very importantly, a happiness and a mindfulness coach on the other. That is something that we need more of, I'm sure. So I'm glad you're doing work in that area, Shikha. Also, she's an avid reader and currently working on uplifting women and mentoring young girls for women leadership. Her mantras in life, passion, perseverance, and creativity, which drive her. And she's a strong believer of positive psychology and the law of karma. So I think for a topic like organizational development, I can't think of any better names really to take this session for Attain. So once again, a warm welcome, and the
Thank
stage is
you.
all yours.
Thank you, Vikas. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be in this conversation, and I'm so glad we finally achieved this moment where people are taking interest in wanting to know more about OD. Because I've gone through a Herculean task of trying to explain myself over and over in organizations as to what OD can, entail for them. And thankfully, COVID has catapulted the entire process, and companies are more gung-ho about adopting this, more diligently and more with sincerity, so to say. So with that, I take a quick minute. I'll share my screen with everyone. Just give me a second. I want to talk about how, we've all struggled with moving from training to learning concept, really. So now is the time where we are trying to move into the next phase of training and development, which is OD. And I know for all reasons it can get really difficult for us to understand, because training was one phase where we were just doing skill transfer, knowledge sharing. Learning then came into picture where the focus became more in the application part of it. What is it that you're doing to ensure that the whatever training you've done, it sticks in that individual's life and affects the organization positively? So that was more about the learning cycle. It took us a decade, really, and we can't deny that it's going to take us a longer time perhaps to get into the OD mind frame, so to say. But you cannot deny the existence of this COVID era. The fact that we've gone through this turbulent time, it has, in all possible ways, triggered the HR's next evolution phase, which to my assessment is nothing but OD. Because your entire focus today has moved to inculcating the right kind of culture, the right kind of DNA, having the employees at the center of the organization, ensuring that you're able to thrive despite the VUCA environment and the harm that COVID has caused in terms of higher stress and anxiety levels too. Having said that, I would also want to mention that we all know that there are new trends that are coming in today because of this very phase. And HR analytics was something that shaped up, but today the decision making based on data has become even more important, right? Doing initiatives where you're keeping employee mental health and well-being at the center of it also has become extremely vital. With that, I think we need to realize what is it that needs to get into it to enhance the company in totality, okay, and to actually get it into a system where it will continue to thrive despite whatever happens in the outside world. And that calls for a new age thinking. That calls for a new DNA to be constructed within the organization. The pandemic has given us clarity. It has given us that direction. We all know that it's important to create a purpose-led organization more than ever. And if you're not doing that, somewhere or the other, you'll see yourself falling apart, or the business is getting on side tracks where it's not giving you as much results as is required. We've seen in the traditional organization, right? The traditional organization is the one where you have hierarchy, you have a top-down approach, you have bureaucracy, people are working in silos. This is not the time where you can have that kind of same traditional systems or organizations operate. If you were to thrive in these circumstances, the organizations are required to be far more agile. And we've all gotten introduced to it in several ways possible. But applying that in all entirety is a different ballgame altogether. So you need flexible resources, you need directions, enablers for yourself. You need to focus on, leveraging more on giving flexibility to your employees, and also allow more accountability and ownership to come through. So there are pretty much two different value systems that we are trying to create today in organizations. So the new value system calls for more project-led initiatives, more collaboration, little less of leader direction and more of collaborative work would be extremely, extremely helpful. At the same time, I think what is also critical for us to realize is that if you're going into the previous frame over and over, which is habitual, I think something that you've been doing for all these years, it's very normal that you tend to go back to it. So while you're making your attempts to move to an agile organization, what's important is that we take some time out and focus on helping people to reframe their identities. There's a certain way they're used to associating their roles or their contributions in the company. Till the time we don't stitch that say-do gap, we don't just keep talking about creating flexibility or, creating an organization which is agile. You also need to spend time to allow them to know how they can contribute, and take them through that process, which makes them feel, okay, this is my role in bringing this bigger change or creating an organism kind of agile organization, so to say. So I think every little element has a role to play, and as we move forward, we're going to touch on those pillars also, and definitely decode or demystify OD in every possible way for you. It's not just about implementing something new, really. When we talk about OD, this is one common misconception that I've come across. People tend to feel it's more about transitioning or bringing something new in the company. It's not really that. It's a little beyond that, because once you put something new into play or execute a new process or change, so to say, you also need to make a lot of effort to ensure that the change sticks in the organization and it is well understood and adopted by your employees. That's where most organizations face a challenge, honestly. And this is something that calls for a major transformation. So I'll give an example of something I did in one of my previous organizations. They had launched the learning management system, and the adoption rate after almost a year was just about 28%. And that's when I got on board with them. So we realized that the entire process and the investment of putting that system into play was one part of it, which was, conceptualizing it and executing the change, like I said. But bringing that into the frame of actually making it a transformation of inculcating a learning culture, it needed a lot more effort than that. And we needed to ensure that the employees understand what's in it for them and get it into the DNA of the organization, which called for transformation and several other initiatives and activities around it. So we had to do a lot of, campaigns around it. We had to run initiatives to encourage people to take more learnings, have mailers going out to acknowledge the ones who are more active on the learning platform, so on and so forth. So almost from 1,500 users we were targeting, this 28% went up to 90% at the end of 6 months itself. So this was a major transformation that we brought. It wasn't just about the platform. It was about inculcating learning into the culture of the organization and the individuals take a lead to develop themselves. So this was one such example I can share with you. It's pretty sad, when you look at an organization, you look at HR functions, we're talking about hiring, we're talking about putting the processes into place for them in terms of giving them KRAs and jobs to do. But if we don't focus enough on nourishing them, on nurturing them, there are very little chances that the talent will flourish or prosper. I'll give you a quick analogy there. Say you have 5 plants in your balcony, and every day in the morning you walk out and you water 4 plants, but leave the 5th one. What's going to happen to the 5th one? It's going to die, right? Because we're not giving it that kind of time and nourishment and water that's required. It's the same thing with talent in companies. And therefore, it's important that we start looking at the complete length and breadth of development that is required, which is a part of the transformation that you're trying to create as an organization, right? OD, to my assessment, is nothing but a culture building exercise. It's all about change management, which ought to be more proactive than reactive. I've seen organizations do this when they're really pushed against the wall, where they have no other option but to actually get their head into the drawing board and the storyboard and figure out what needs to be stitched where. But to my assessment, a real OD execution would be when you're proactive about these aspects as to how you want to be identified. What is the personality of the organization that you're trying to create? And therefore, what kind of change processes it will entail? And you need to take them through right from the scratch. At the same time, the biggest reality is that when you're trying to do that, you will come across a lot of these, different influencers, so to say. So you have to deal with people, you have to deal with processes, the systems, and the climate. None of it can be ignored, right? At all times, when you're trying to create the change process, we would have to deal with these matrices day in and day out. So just like, a body weakens when the muscles are weak, just the bone structure can't do much. Similarly, I think an organization can't do much if the culture muscle has gone weak. So this is where the real focus of OD lies. And if you want the organization to thrive, you need to invest in their talent and make them young and capable and empower them in every way possible, right? So that's something that goes unaddressed. Sometimes we're doing it in pockets. We're doing more staggered activities. If all of it is not integrated, the kind of impact we're trying to create at an organization level, it doesn't really come through, right? Having said that, when you're trying to make a change in the organization, it isn't that easy and it does not happen overnight, right? It requires a lot of factors. You need leaders who can champion the cause with you. You need an army of influencers who can take the word forward and invest in it day in and day out along with you. You also need to do a multi-dimensional kind of approach where you're trying to keep triggering into the brains and the DNA of the organization through consistent efforts. And at the same time, ensure that while you're doing all of this, you're building a sense of purpose and commitment at all levels possible in the organization. So bringing a change and building culture really takes a toll on a lot of companies, and having the right competencies or the skill sets also comes in the way somewhere. We're going to talk about that towards a little later. Right now, I also want to talk about something else, which is what is it that you need to focus on when you're trying to build culture of an organization? A few of the things that a lot of top leaders talk about is to ensure that you're keeping employees at the center of it. And to do that, you also have to ensure a culture of, absolute trust and candor. Somewhere, in one of the surveys, it was found out that 93% employees feel that if they don't have trust levels with their supervisor, their entire well-being and happiness gets affected at the workplace primarily, which has become the talk of the town today. At the same time, the culture of appreciation is something that needs to be delved into. Unfortunately, 79% employees say because of lack of appreciation from their managers, they leave organizations. And these are things that make you lose talent. These are things that make you, reinvent the wheel and even increases your expenditure, when it comes to talent recruitment and acquisition. So these are things that need to be delved into and worked at a foundational level, because this is the cornerstone of, what's going to make your company thrive, irrespective of what is happening in the outside world. And we all know today there's no guarantee. This pandemic is kind of settling in for a bit because of the vaccine coming into play. But at the same time, we know there are other dynamics that are playing their role. And the economic crisis is here for sure for another 2-3 years for us to deal with, resulting in a lot of dynamics for organizations to grapple. And there are very, very harmful effects on the psychology of employees, which we have to deal with too as HR. So we cannot but focus on, building a culture of learning, sharing, collaboration, and constant feed forward and feedback if possible, because that's going to keep the entire team, galvanized. It will help you to insulate your employees against the harmful effects of the high stress and anxiety which has gotten created. So through surveys, it is, Gallup did one survey where it was clearly evident that if an organization is able to address well-being of employees along with their engagement and they're keeping the life experiences at the foremost priority, most of the employees have come back with very positive results in terms of being able to thrive in their life despite the crisis. And almost 23% reported very high or improved mental health. 17% employees were able to report improved physical health as well. So these are things that make us think more diligently on focusing on doing this more proactively than reactively. So we're going to delve into some more factors of what it takes to do one complete OD intervention, so to say. There is a life cycle, and I can give you a quick analogy of, using a canvas, arranging your colors, ensuring you have your strokes ready, and have pictures and some, kind of physical appeal to it. And last but not the least, stick it together so that there's a nice story that you're able to tell them. Each of these 5 phases or stages that I've spoken of have a very high relevance in making your OD intervention successful, right? The first stage is that of strategy. When you talk strategy, what you're trying to do is you're trying to define the who, what, where, when, why, and how you're going to do that intervention or go through the process. So the subsequent slide, I'm also going to share an example with you, which is going to allow you to understand this better. So you formulate your culture framework, you formulate your roadmap as to what is it that you need to address, define the 5 W's in 1 H, have your resources and relevance ready. So you must know where you stand today in terms of the organization's culture, in terms of what you're trying to achieve as a company, what's your direction, and what are some hurdles that may come in your way. And therefore, we need those factors to be addressed through a OD intervention, perhaps. So you arrange all the resources, you ensure your alignment is clear, you're able to link to the correct current practices, and then at the same time have timelines for your project. Have some kind of processes laid down that are going to help you to execute that intervention. Fourth step is branding and creating a hook. So when I say branding, it actually calls for a lot of infographics and designing and making sure that you're making this information readily accessible, visible to people around you. So spreading awareness, educating your people about it, making it look and sound interesting and relatable to them, all of this becomes a part of creating that hook, in your OD intervention. And the last phase is when you want to stabilize that practice or whatever change you're trying to create, you need to ensure there's a proper ecosystem Okay, so either it's kind of ingrained into your policies and your system somewhere, or you have leaders who become champions, who take ownership to keep driving it day in and day out. So all of this is important. You also need to add some element of recall somewhere, because if you just kind of execute and forget about it, like I gave you the example of the learning system, if there's no recall, people don't know there's a platform available, there are very little chances that it will be adopted or people will make use of it. So you need to constantly publicize, constantly tell people that this platform is available for you. This is what is happening on it. So many people have benefited from it. And whatever incentivization you've thought of, whatever reward and recognition you've thought of, you can talk about that. Okay, so and so is one, the learner champion of the month kind of thing also. So all of this helps you consistently to build that process. At any stage, there is a possibility of you getting bounced back also. So maybe at the stage of stabilization, you realize there are some more alignments that are required, or some more executions that may be required to stabilize the process. So it's always better to go back to those phases and to actually execute the necessary processes, which will help you to stitch and kind of stick it into the system of the company, like I say. So that's the entire life cycle of an OD intervention. We're going to give a couple of more examples as we move forward. Let's see one such thing that I did in one of my previous organizations. It was more to do with ethics, and we needed to build a culture of ethics. We needed employees to understand what's okay and what's not okay. Having a module which is uploaded somewhere in the HRMS system called Code of Conduct didn't really solve the purpose. The management realized that they needed to do some grassroots work and some granular level work to ensure that the employees are on board with them and they understand ethics in and out in terms of conduct that's okay and conduct that's not okay, and also support it with systems that will allow the entire organization to feel the need to be more compliant and be more committed to it, and kind of inculcate that as a value system for them. So this entire process had to be undertaken. We started off by doing the basic assessments, defining what roadmap we have to take, what kind of alignment is required from the parent organization and the current organization that we were a part of. We needed to also understand what all processes would be required to develop as a ecosystem around it. So it didn't just call for a revamp of their ethics manual or defining it in black and white as to what are the do's and what are the don'ts under each ethic parameter that we were stating. We also needed to support it through a process where we had to launch something like an ethics helpline. We also needed to have a whistleblower proper mechanism, some kind of HR disciplinary processes, and form a committee that could address these kind of issues when they surface in the company. So the entire thing got shaped up through a project planner. We had timelines and we had constant follow-ups and reviews happening with leaders and the managers. And subsequent to which, we also needed to support it with proper awareness and education. Like I said, it's important. So we did classroom sessions as well as we did online education to track how many people have gotten aware of it, followed by a quiz and a quick check so that, it kind of sticks in their memory. And soon after that, after I think a month's time, we also did something called a reinforcement, and we titled it as one rule, one rule, which means there is no bargain, there is no exception to this, ethics that we are laying down as a value system. And to make it more visually appealing, we had to design posters and create that kind of recall across the organization, and had displays put up, which you can see on the screen right now. So all of this work is a requirement of, say, one OD intervention that we needed to do around inculcating ethics and making it a part of the value system, so to say. So this is one such example. With that, I'd also like to emphasize on what are the various roles that you would undertake when you're doing an OD kind of role. Here, you can see the four major categories here. You become a project manager for sure, because you have framework and timelines to chase. You need to maintain agility in the workflow and realize when it is time for you to go back and make some quick changes and ensure that the workflow doesn't get affected. At the same time, you need to operate as a marketing person, because you have to be digitally and offline, in that mode where you're able to create more visibility. You're constantly working on creating reckoners. You're also trying to ensure that people are well aware of what you're trying to do and what this change entails for them. So that calls for branding work and content creation. That's the stage where you really get your head into creating more relevance for the audience, for the employees, for the leaders. You do your research, you customize where required. You try to create that ethos which shows that purpose and alignment with the core values of the organization, and constantly create content around reckoners which will be used in the marketing stage. And throughout this process, as a OD person, you also need to operate as a people engineer and a system architect. When I say people engineer, it means you have to constantly be in touch with people. You need to understand what they're thinking, how they're receiving that piece of information, what kind of communication would help you, and be approachable, be accessible to them and make that information readily available. So if you're trying to say, when we were trying to execute POSH as a compliance, we realized that we as an organization wanted to do it more from the culture perspective and make the workplace a place where people mutually respect each other, and a gender agnostic kind of theme was something we wanted to build. And with that, we realized that people were not very keen on listening to this concept of sexual harassment. There was a taboo. Men thought it was only for women when we started doing the education sessions. So we really needed to be there with them, that constant connect, understanding what's happening, understanding what they're thinking about their entire initiative, helped us to go back to the drawing board and bring out communication mailers, or even if it called for managers to communicate it to them. We did all of that. Okay, we had to realize which medium would work best for what kind of information, and we had to change that strategy there and then. So all kind of necessary processes that are required for you to ensure it sticks in the system is also one of the roles that you will have to play. So I term it as a system architect. You have to be a systems person. You need to understand what it takes to streamline the entire practice and to institutionalize that into the system, so to say. So at all these times, you will face challenges. You'll have to keep finding ambassadors in the organizations, the leaders who can support you for the cause. You are, while doing all of this as an OD person, you're interacting with various layers, right? So I remember when I was doing this work, I was interacting with not just my managers, but also the divisional heads, the functional heads, and my top management. So at any given point in time, for say one particular OD project, I would be interacting with 8 to 10 people to a maximum of 30 to 40 also. Because it was more like a pan-India work. And it was a Herculean task, to get everybody on board, to get all the pieces fit in, and to ensure that the communication is crystal clear, concise, and something that is actionable for them. So making their job simple also comes, as something you need to focus on. Making things simple, making things very relatable for them when you're trying to execute an OD intervention. So irrespective of what theme you're working. So one of the themes that I did work on was to create a social interaction platform, an informal one for the employees. It was an internal platform, so like a Facebook for us. So the branding was done, but the adoption was bare minimum. Again, we just about had, I think, 15% employees on that platform. So my task was to ensure that the adoption is there, and that the fact that it becomes a part of their system. So forming various communities of people who would encourage it, making top management accountable for it, and then running drives and initiatives where I could build recognition. We had to do a lot of inorganic work to begin with, to kind of pull people into the platform, so that we have 100% users registered to begin with. Then we to ensure that we create hooks and campaigns in some kind of interest area, so that they start providing more inputs there. Because the fundamental reason why social interaction platform was required, because people didn't know what was happening across various regions. Sometimes even the top management decisions that were taken was something that employees were getting to know through Twitter or through other social media platforms, which isn't what the company wanted. So the social interaction platform, internal, was largely targeting to reach out to all the regional offices, to all the salespeople, and it also needed to ensure that people are finding it engaging, consuming this information. So it had to be interesting. It had to be something that had more meaning for them, even as a person. So a lot of personalization went into it, a lot of customization went into it. We took ideas from the employees themselves and then started to stitch in these solutions. So multiple layers of, I think, interactions always is a part of it, which is why I keep emphasizing that people construct is one of the biggest constructs for you. You need to focus on that day in and day out. And that calls for a lot of skills and competencies, really. When you're trying to do all of this, the skills and competencies that come handy to you are cognitive and emotional resilience, your creativity and innovation, because you would need to know how to change the game plan, but yet achieve the focus of your intervention. You'll need to be strategically well equipped. You have to have that kind of process excellence and system approach, and the social intelligence, because you're dealing with people, and at all times you'll have a lot of these dilemmas and biases coming the way that need to be grappled with. You also need to champion as a project leader, as a project manager, ensure that at the grass level, at the ground level, you are keeping yourself engaged and involved with them. You're also running something which keeps them interested in the story that you're trying to build through the change, and be digitally proficient, and definitely not miss out the bigger picture of the business as to where we are trying to go through that intervention or the change that you're trying to create in the system. So these are some of the fundamentals that I can think of, and I thought it's important for us to talk about it today. We can have a little more insight on few OD projects that I've done. So I've worked on leadership development and succession planning. I've also institutionalized leadership development end-to-end as a practice, automation of training processes, code of ethics, like I mentioned, creating safe and secured workplaces, institutionalizing POSH and India, risk management compliances for HR trainings, social platform adoption, internal connect, like I spoke about, fostering a happy workplace culture, employee connect, promoting health and well-being, and creating a culture of appreciation. So these are a few of the OD projects that I personally delved into and I worked on with all my previous organizations. So with that, we can have some questions from you. Anything you want to ask, I'd be more than happy to address it.
Sure. Thank you so much, Shikha. I think really valuable, and it helped me also gain some clarity. I was very impressed with that data point which you shared on 23% increase in on improvement in mental health because of a structured OD intervention in an organization. I think that's something that we should all take away. We all know for a fact that mental health nowadays is such a critical aspect of a person's well-being. And if any steps can be taken in that direction, they're always very, very welcome.
Yeah.
And of course, I just like the way you brought about the fact that, and I used to think personally even that it's very hardcore HR kind of work, but honestly, you projected it more as a combination of HR, marketing, operations, and quality, and that's amazing. I think that's something that everyone should aspire to explore at some point. So
True. It's a very different ball game, I can say that for sure. With all my experiences, I think every project has taught me a lot, and with every project, my understanding is also improved. So I was like, okay, I need to do this too. So I would get my head into it and I would get going. So it's pretty much been like that for me. Yeah.
Great. So in fact, while I know a couple of questions have come in, but there's one which has been there with me, which I've kind of wanted to ask you is, what are the blockers and challenges faced when you're trying to execute an OD initiative typically?
Yeah, this is something that, I would love to talk about, because this is the harsh reality. When you're trying to inculcate change in the organization, and that to preempt it, you're bound to come across a lot of resistances, Vikas. And you can't help it, because today as an organization, I think we're gravitating more towards what managers think, what managers believe. It's a very unconscious thing that happens in any organization. So their beliefs come in the way. Their unconscious biases come in the way. They're having not tried this or known about it also come in the way. And most of the times, what I see leaders do, or even L&D teams attempt to do, is they try to attempt to solve the resistance or deal with the resistance. Whereas what is more important is to deal with the reason behind the resistance, which in most of the cases is some kind of fear. Okay, it's either fear of the unknown, or it's fear of some repetition of some past mistake, or it's fear of trying to dedicate too much time to something that is unknown to them, or they have self-doubt, I don't think I can do it, or why should I don't have time. A lot of such questions or thoughts come in the way as blockers and challenges, really. And I don't blame no one here, because I feel it's all justified. It comes from the walks of life that we belong to, and we would have it personally for each one of us. What's critical at that time is to just identify what is the reason and what needs to be done to overcome it. So say, for example, if the manager is getting held back, or he's resisting that change because of his own fear of, say, some past mistake, what's important for you to do then is to get into that level of connect with them, and to actually convince them to understand that the past may not necessarily repeat itself, right? It's quite possible that you may go ahead with something new today because the dynamics, the canvas has changed drastically.
Right.
So maybe X did not work at that point in time, but X may be extremely conducive and workable in today's time, given this kind of a dynamic. So these things, I think, have to be dealt with separately. You do come across some hard stops also. I can't deny that, Vikas, because sudden management changes happen, budget freeze happens. And I think that's one of the most prevalent things for any L&D expert today. So those hard stops also happen. But at the same time, we tend to get discouraged when there is any kind of resistance. So my take on that is you need to understand the reason. That's one. Two, if it calls for some amount of change in your strategy or your planning, or it creates some amount of detouring, it's all right. Okay, it's absolutely workable. You can still get to your actual goal or the objective of the organization, because what you're really trying to do is you're creating an intervention of, like a series of intervention, really trying to create that impact for the company. Right? And it has to be a very integrated kind of a process. If you're not doing it in an integrated way, it will not create the impact for the organization. So that's the most fundamental thing that you need to realize. At all times, when you come across these blockers, like biases for that matter, or some kind of hard stops or detours or any kind of resistances, you need to be very mindful and tactful of what needs to go into it. Sometimes you really don't have an option, you have to stop. So that I won't forego. But when you do, and you do try to understand the entire process of it, or what the manager's trying to hint at, or what's stopping him, then you can deal with it. You will have your way. Sometimes you just need to get a leader who can champion the cause for you and can go act as an ambassador. So that also helps.
True. I couldn't agree more with you. In fact, in that statement of yours struck a chord, where when budgets get tightened, I've also noticed from experience that it's travel and L&D which comes into the line of fire first. So, and that's really sad. So I guess I hope anyone, at least the younger folks who are watching this and trying to learn or take away messages from this, don't make the same mistakes that others have made. In fact, Shauli here has a comment. She says succession planning is not only important for experienced employees, but also for trainees. Any thoughts on that?
Okay, so to answer that, I think I'll divide it into two aspects. One is we need to understand succession planning better. Succession planning is done for critical roles in the organization, which apparently falls into the lap of people at a relatively senior position. Having said that, I think what she's referring to, can I get the name of the person again, please?
Shauli Bakshi.
Shauli. Thank you, Shauli, for that question. The other aspect that I think what Shauli is referring to is more about career progression. So what's critical for us to invest in is to actually know what is it that we need this person to grow into. Say 3 years from now, I expect my executive to grow into an assistant manager role. And another 2-3 years, I expect this assistant manager to grow into a deputy manager. And to allow that process to happen, these are the fundamental tenets or skill sets or competencies that I need to equip him with. And those processes, those trainings, those competencies have to be made available. So no two ways about it. We need to invest in that. And I've always looked at OD or L&D as a person who's a gardener, somebody who's a pathfinder for the organization, who actually gets you on the right track, right? And you ought to invest that kind of time to nourish every seed. You can't sit back and say, I got an excellent seed. Okay, I planted it well. The soil is perfect, but it's not growing. Okay, this is pretty much what organizations tend to do with talent. Okay, there is no wrong or incapable, underperforming employee. There is only non-conducive environment or inappropriate leadership. That's what I strongly believed in. So if there's ever an issue, I think what's required is to create more conducive ecosystem, to create better practices, to develop leaders. And with that, you will have more and more talent getting enriched, and their possibility of growing and development improves and enhances.
Awesome. Thanks. There's one question which has come in from the audience. How can companies become more employee-centric?
Yeah, very good question. So employee centricity really is something which I think should have happened long time before. I think with COVID, because people have started to realize that it's critical and it's vital to their existence now. Having said that, there have still been a lot of people and organizations who've chucked out employees. There's been massive, layoffs that have happened, which has resulted in a lot of fear psychosis. Okay, the stress and anxiety as it is was very, very high. So if you really mean to keep employees at the center of it, there are a lot of good practices that you can inculcate. So there are 5 C's that I would like to talk about, or in fact, there's a model. Can I share that with you just 1 second?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so this is my approach to it. I would call it embrace your employees. If you want to be an employee-centric company, you really need to embrace them in every possible way. You need to be empathetic. You need to encourage them day in and day out to take more initiatives, to ask questions if required. Ensure you're able to inculcate that curiosity in them, because that's what is going to allow you to become a learning organization too. Keep their motivation and morale level high, through various interventions, engagement, R&R schemes, so to say. Respond to them on time, because what has happened during this phase, a lot of virtual work has increased. And most of our managers are not quite adept in that process, and they tend to miss out on queries or to some hassle that they may have sensed during the conversation. They don't go back to it. They don't close that loop. So what's also critical is that we are responding to our employees on not just the official matters, but also the non-official ones, something which may be personal to them, and see if you can help in some way. Try to reassure them that if there is something that is happening, say, for example, when I spoke of layoffs, it created that fear psychosis, which is counterproductive to their efficiency and performance. So what was important was that we needed to get into conversations and reassure the employees that there's nothing like that lined up for you. And even if we had that kind of targets as management, as HR, sometimes you ought to do that for business, efficiencies and productivity. If it's in the pipeline, we need to make it crystal clear to employees that this is what may happen and this is how it will be shaped up, so that employees are completely well aware of what's ahead of them. Also ensure that as HR, you're constantly asking employees what next they would need from you, right? How can you help them better? What are the other things that may be required for, to do their jobs better? Appreciate them when they are putting in an extra effort. And during this time, I think people are putting in an extra effort, especially because they've not been used to working from home. There are a lot of challenges that they're grappling with, the dog coming behind them, or their kids coming and pouncing on them, or some kind of noise being in the background. So anything that they're trying to do to ensure that they get their peace of mind and they're able to do a focused task and deliver on time is something where you can appreciate them a little more. In today's time, I think it's required more than ever. I'm sorry, I missed out the B part of it, of embrace. B is about being there. Okay, just be there for them. No matter what, they should know that you have their back as employees and you're going to support them. The C stands for check-ins and constant communication. And when I say check-ins, I mean something which is more informal, something like, okay, let's have coffee together in the morning tomorrow, right? So as a manager, I think most of us are diligent in following up on the tasks being closed. So that communication pipeline has absolutely no hassle. We don't really need to focus on that. What we need to focus on is creating an informal communication channel and having these frequent check-ins with them. And last but not the least, you also need to do something called, focusing on ethics and empowerment. With workplaces becoming more hybrid today,
Yep.
More fluidity coming into how the work is being flown in, I think the emphasis on ethics needs to improve, and you need to do a little more conscious work there so that people don't, take the system on a ride or leak information which is confidential for the organization, and keep them empowered. Some of the companies did something beautiful where they reached out to employees and asked them, do you have a work from home network or a setup? Do you need some kind of systems for yourself? And they allotted this extra allowance which enabled them to create a work from home space. Okay, they also went to the extent of saying, okay, you can have 2 hours extra every week to take care of any responsibility at your home front. So all this is empowering, and during this stressful time, this is something that acted like as an enabler for them. So this is everything about employee centricity. Plus, I think one of the biggest aspects that you need to ensure you're inculcating when you want to be an employee-centric company is to focus on commitment at all levels. Everybody has to feel a part of that one mission, and also have an element of celebration somewhere. Okay, celebration of not just achievements, but also efforts put in as a team. I think those are very, very fundamental today. Even working as a community has an edge because organizations that start contributing on the social front have a better edge today, and employees tend to feel more at home and more secured and more safe with companies that are solving a purpose at large at a social level. So these are all researched and proven facts, and worth imbibing if you want to keep employee at the center of the company.
Great, Shikha. Thanks for that. I think this embrace model has really been appreciated by our audience, seeing sort of a lot of comments in the chat box.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing this. And there are 2 more questions. We are over our planned time, but if you are okay, we can take these 2 to wrap it up.
I'm okay, sure.
Lovely. Thanks for that. So Vrinda asks a question, which is, how do you balance generational expectations through intervention when it comes to, I think, corporate culture, if I've understood the question correctly?
Mm-hmm. So generational expectations, honestly, to my assessment, is something to do with, I think she's referring to millennials here.
Millennials, and I guess some of the, the Gen X also being around, and in many organizations, you have the entire Gen X.
You may have a mixed too.
Mixed group.
Yeah. Correct. So if you have a mixed group, I think data analysis is very important for you to realize what population is predominant in the organization. But at the same time, you cannot forego the ones that have a little lesser percentage either. And I think a mixed approach is what will make more sense there. So fundamentally, say, for example, if you're talking about youngsters, they see more, they like speed, they like purpose, they like gratification quickly. So for them, you need to come up with practices that would encourage them, inspire them on those fronts.
Right.
And for Generation X, they want more stability. They appreciate something that will give them more, learning, so to say. So they're relatively a little more focused, I would say, strata of the organization. So for them, something which is steady and something that they could see progression in would matter to them more. Whereas for millennials, you need to have practices where they're able to jump leaps and bounds. So there should be opportunities. When you talk about your talent development strategy, you should have such options created in your roadmap where you allow people such kind of opportunities. So I'll give you a quick example. We were running this happiness, workplace culture project where we needed to encourage more and more people to come forward. And this was a pretty much mixed crowd. Okay, the option we created was that if you take up this project and you're able to deliver, say, 1, 2, 3, you get a chance to get a 5% extra increment. Okay, or you get a chance to get promoted to the next level at a lesser time as compared to the others. So these kind of leeways or practices we inculcated only to make it more conducive for the other generations, right? Whereas there was a steady progression also available. We had a steady succession planning also available for the other stratas of the organization. So I think that could be one example that could come handy.
Very nice. Thank you. And Akhil's question is one we'll take last. Would you recommend any specific OD model which has seen a lot of success?
Yeah, I'm really one last person who goes by a book. So I've always felt that every single organization has very, very different dynamics, very different set of people, and there can absolutely be no thumb rules. Okay, to give you an example, if there are two set engineers given a task to build say a vehicle for a particular village to carry water for them, but the villages are on two different terrains. Okay, one is in the forest, the other one is on a mountain. The actual design that comes out will be completely unique and customized to that particular village, right? It's not going to work for the other one. So I really don't believe in a thumb rule model here. I'm afraid, Ankit. What's important for you to realize is that you need to understand your people, and you need to understand the philosophy of the organization and your leaders. These three things. Once you understand them and you understand what makes them going, what moves them, what matters to them, you can create a complete roadmap for yourself, and obviously take them on board with you and make them feel involved, make others accountable so that you can take the process forward. So it's pretty much as simple as that.
Lovely. And I think I would tend to agree with you, Shikha, because again, after so many years in the corporate world, and I think one of the main driving facts behind Attain also, like I said at the start, has been to kind of not disregard the theory, but at least get the practical side and the experiential side of how we operate in the corporate world into the campuses and into young people's hands. So totally with you on that, and I think this is a great session to kind of get that validated in a sense, because the kind of practical examples that you showcased are examples that I'm sure the audience will be able to relate to. And I saw a comment also, Shalu, I believe, who said that looking forward to implementing some of this in their organization. So great. Happy to really hear that.
Wonderful. Happy to hear this.
And again, Anupam feels is very informative. So thanks, Anupam. And really thank you all for your time this afternoon. We'll be back soon with yet another Knowledge Now talk by another expert on another topic. So stay tuned to our social handles, and you'll get to hear every fortnight. It's a different topic, and it's not necessarily HR centric. It may be any other industry, just to give you a perspective. So I hope that you will look forward to it. Thank you once again, Shikha, for really
thank you.
doing such a beautiful session today.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you to everyone for joining in and for being tuned in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.